As your Cubase project gets longer and as you add more events and tracks, you'll begin to find that it gets more difficult to navigate the project. This tutorial is going to look at some of the functions that help make it a little bit easier to navigate Cubase projects. Firstly, the zoom tool here in the project window tools, if I select that by clicking on it, I can then zoom in within a particular area of the timeline by clicking. When I click here, the timeline begins to zoom in, centering on the exact part of the timeline where I clicked. If I hold down the Alt key and click, I zoom out again. I can also use the zoom tool by dragging a box around a particular area on the timeline. When I release the mouse key, the timeline is going to zoom in on that specific area. There's a third way that I can zoom in and out on the timeline. If I place the mouse somewhere in the ruler, hold down the left-hand mouse button, so I've now clicked and I'm holding down the left-hand mouse button. If I then drag the cursor upwards, we're going to begin to zoom out. And if I drag the cursor downwards, still holding down the left-hand mouse button, we're going to zoom back in again. And if you find yourself zoomed in very closely to a small area of the timeline, there's another useful shortcut here. If I hold down the Shift key and press F on the keyboard, that returns my view to a zoom level whereby I can see all of the events in the project. At the moment I still have the zoom tool selected. I can return to the normal mode, which is object selection mode, from within the project window tools by clicking on the object selection tool. The left and right locators, by default, they live in the ruler, and by default when you start a Cubase project they're both in the same place at 0. Now I can move those by dragging them, so I'm dragging the right locator there and I'm dragging the left locator now. I can also position the left locator by holding down the Control key and clicking somewhere in the ruler. And for the right locator, it's the Alt key that I hold down. There's another useful shortcut with the locators. What I'm doing now is selecting different events on the timeline. And if I have an event selected and I press the P key on the keyboard, that will immediately set the left and right locators so that they're around the event that I had selected. The same thing happens if I select multiple events by holding down Shift and clicking on multiple events, press P and the locators will immediately be set so that they're around those events. Some other useful keyboard shortcuts. If I press the space key when the cursor isn't moving, then we start playing. If I press the space key again, stops playing. So space to start, space bar to stop. Shift B, hold down the Shift key and press B, will immediately move the cursor back to the beginning of the project. And Shift N, hold down the Shift key and press N, will immediately move the cursor to the very end of the last event in the project. If I press the number 1 on the numeric keypad, that will immediately move my cursor to the position of the left locator. And if I press 2 on the numeric keypad, that will immediately move my cursor to the right locator. The / key on the numeric keypad can be used to toggle the cycle function on and off. You'll notice as I press it, cycle is now on the transport, cycle is now off. The cycle tool can also, a transport cycle can also be found there. Now when cycle is on, the cursor will loop around the area that's selected by the locators. If I now turn cycle off. When the cursor gets to the right locator, it goes past it. The J key on the keyboard toggles the snap function on and off. Now this is quite an important feature to familiarize yourself with. Here it is. If I press the J key, the snap is now off. If I press J key again, snap is on. Now snap affects almost everything when you're navigating around the timeline. So for example, placing the cursor. If I try to move the cursor here so that it's somewhere in between 5 and 6 seconds, I'm holding down the mouse button at the moment. Now when I release it, notice that the cursor snaps to 5 seconds. That's because snap is on. If I turn snap off, I can then place the cursor anywhere I want. The snap feature affects lots of other functionalities as well. For example, moving events with snap on and with snap off. Resizing events by dragging the handle with snap on and with snap off. Setting the locators is also affected by whether snap is on or off. With snap on, I can only move to subdivisions of 1000 milliseconds. I could change that to 100. It's still snapping, notice. The movement isn't completely smooth. But with snap off, I can put the locators wherever I want them. Snap is a very complex feature. Those are just some of the most basic ways in which it can be used. Finally, the ruler. At the moment I'm looking at the ruler and it's showing time in seconds. I can change that by right-clicking in the ruler. So I could select bars and beats, which would be useful, for example, if I was writing a rhythmical piece of music. Notice that that affects the snap function as well. Now it's telling me that the snap function is going to snap to each bar. Whereas if I change to seconds, it becomes a number of milliseconds. We've looked at some of the keyboard shortcuts. There are many more. The full list of keyboard shortcuts in Cubase can be found from inside the File menu by selecting the Key Commands option. And we can see here that there really are dozens and dozens and dozens of them.